Hey everybody, this is Perch, and this is one of those cases where I'm answering an email with a video because in this weird, bizarro world, that is faster and easier than just answering the mail. I don't know why that is. It's a mystery to me, but here we are. But anyway, the question is basically like I've done these videos on overships, and I've said that overships really aren't a factor, and a lot of people who talk about overships don't really seem to know what overships are, what they're doing, and we're not talking about that. But the mail basically goes, "Hey, I hear you on overships. I hear you saying that. However, I'm sorry. I just drove by. There's like, I'm, I'm sorry for the non sequitur, but this is just hilarious. I wish I would have been videoing it. I'm driving by and there's a Kohl's here, so I'm driving by the Kohl's, and Kohl's has got two entrances, and one of them is all, it's COVID time, so it's all blocked up. And on the blocked up doors are giant signs saying, "We, don't you use other entrance. This entrance closed." And there's this woman that is frantically and standing in front of the doors that say closed with a giant poster that says closed, and she's like waving at the sensor trying to get the door to open. It's like the entire time I'm rolling by, she just keeps waving, and this giant sign is right in front of her. Anyway, sorry, that was just hysterical. It totally broke my chain of thought. Anyway, the mail goes, I hear you on overships. However, how do you respond to Twitter and Facebook where people post photos of these giant stacks of comics that are unsold? What does this say about the comic industry that these comics can't sell? How do you respond to these giant stacks of comics? Are these all overships, or what's going on here? And the answer is one that I feel like people aren't going to like, but it's a simple one. And it's called the comic shop ordered those copies. They ordered those extra copies. And we can say that, it would be a wonderful thing if all the comics just sold, and it would. That would be marvelous. However, no, comics don't just fly out the door. Whatever you order, it doesn't leave, and nor are we ever going to live in a world where that's the case. Even in the newsstand with hundreds of thousands of copies, you could over order books, and you could have books on the shelf, and some books would sell, some books wouldn't. The books that are getting there are books that the comic shop decided to buy. They weren't. Well, I mean, again, you can kind of paint the argument any way you want. But the comic shop wasn't tricked to buy those books. The comic shop wasn't forced to buy those books. There was some very weird narrative going out, and I'd love to find the source of that. I think it was one of the bigger YouTubers basically came out with this Marvel makes you buy comics. Like they were forcing comic shops to buy extra copies of Captain Marvel, or they were threatening that they wouldn't be able to get comics anymore. And there's zero truth to that. I'm sorry. There's zero truth. If anybody would love to present the email from David Gabriel or whatever it happens to be, there. I can say it definitively. At no point has Marvel ever said you have to order Captain Marvel, or we're going to cut off your ability to order Marvel completely. That's not the case. It's never. There's in no world is that the case. Flat statement. Anyone who's claiming that is lying. I'm sorry. What does happen, and this happens very, very frequently, and by the time you hear this video, I've already will have had him on, Yul Carter, who runs Fantastic Comics. Excellent YouTube channel, by the way. You've got to check that out. Go subscribe. Give that guy a boost. He does good, hard work, and he deserves. We got to promote some of these voices up that are doing great stuff. But Yul Carter is search UEL Carter in YouTube and subscribe to the guy's channel. He does great stuff. Anyway, he's a shop owner, Berkeley, California, Fantastic Comics. And he'll say, I'm saying this in advance of the live stream, what he'll be on, but I'm confident I know what he's going to say. The big stacks of comics get there because comic shops order them. And sometimes they order them because they think that's what they can sell. And sometimes they overorder because they are qualifying for a variant. And this is where I think things get muddled and confused. Is people say, well, isn't that a trick? Isn't that an example of Marvel basically forcing you to buy something you don't want? And the answer is not really, because the comic shops, what they want is that variant. The variant requires a certain order number to receive it. And it's really no different than saying if you order 10 copies of something, you get a price discount. I've heard people argue that fact too, like, well, it's unfair. They should just give the price discount no matter how many times, whether you order one or 10,000. And no, it doesn't work that way. Companies incent you in various ways, whether it's a price discount or a variant, to order more copies. And because the variant market is what it is, collectors will come in and say, I will pay $100 for that variant. And the comic shop retailer will sit down there with their little calculator and go, okay, well, I have to buy 50 copies of this comic in order to get that one variant, which means I was planning to order, 10 copies of Captain Marvel #1, but now I'm going to order 50 copies of Captain Marvel #1. I know I can sell 10 because that was what I was originally going to order, but I'm basically going to order 40 more copies. And that's going to cost me $80, but I'm going to be able to sell this variant to this whale customer for $100, so I'll make a $20 profit and I'll have extra comics on the shelf, and maybe they sell, maybe they don't. If they don't, I'll take them down to half price books and I'll get, pennies on the dollar for them. And, either way, this is financially a good move for me. That's what's going on. It would be great if, you didn't have to order all these copies in order to get the variant copy. Wouldn't that be wonderful if, you could basically get the variant copy that you're going to sell for $100 and only order one copy? That'd be great. But here's the thing. The collector wouldn't pay $100 for it if it was easy to get like that. If there was more copies out there that you could qualify for, if you could just, the reason why the price goes up is because they're harder to get, because you have to qualify and do certain things in order to get that. And so that's kind of the game that's played. Is it an unfair game? This kind of is one of those don't hate the player, hate the game kind of situations. That's what's going on. So when you see giant stacks on a comic book shelf, it's not because a poor comic shop is suddenly stuck unwittingly, and that's the operative word, with 100 copies of Captain Marvel #1. It's because they elected to order that many for reasons that are of their own. Maybe they had variant covers already paid for. That's 9 times out of 10 that is the reason. But more often than not, or sorry, not more often, the other option is people still think #1s will sell. So retailers will sometimes order big and pay the penalty when they don't sell. And if this was 10 years ago, you could make more of an argument that, hey, Marvel Comics, bait and switched everybody by putting out a #1, but flooding the markets with so many #1s and relaunches that, they tricked retailers into thinking this was going to be more valuable, more collectible than it was. I still think that argument would be a little dodgy, but you could still make it. In 2021, we've seen this so often, month after month after month. It's hard to feel sympathy for a retailer that over orders by hundreds of copies of a comic and then can't sell them. It's just, the game at this point. It's at that point, your business. If you're doing this, then I'm sorry, that's on you. You voluntarily decided to buy that many copies of the comic. I can't sit here and go, well, the poor innocent retailer got snookered by Marvel. Like, not really. You place that order. You see what the volumes of these comics can do. If this is how you're going to run your business, then yeah, your business is going to go out of business very soon. It's really no different than if you decided to have business hours of like 3 p.m. to 4:30 every day, and that's it. And on Wednesdays, New Comic Day, you're just closed because you don't like working on Wednesdays. I mean, that again, that's kind of on you. The other fact, and this one also irks people, because I know a couple of comic pros and editors. I think Heather Antos has made this point several times. That name is triggering for a lot of people. Have said, hey, these photos of these giant stacks on shelves are almost always #1 comics. They're the first issue. And that's a big reason why there's big stacks, because people order high on #1s, and there's variants and there's incentive programs and everything else. And so the #1s are bigger. So when you see these photos of stacks and they're the first issue of something or an anniversary issue of something, that's a little misleading, because that issue always orders high. And, I know it'll make people maybe mad to hear it, but she's right. #1 issues, comic shops order high on for the reasons we've been talking about. And almost all the photos you see of people like, at their comic shop, and they're like, look at these huge stacks of unsellable comics. If you look closely, you'll notice they're almost invariably number one issues, which means that, number one, that store was getting it on some variant covers, so they ordered high. Number two, that store believed or believes that collectors come in buying number one issues of things, and so they ordered high. What is true is that Marvel didn't call up that comic shop and say, "Hey, I've been noticing that you only order 5 copies of Captain Marvel, and we're starting to think you might be a misogynist, so you're going to need to order 50 copies." They like that. That's not happening. I you've heard from enough retailers. Don't take my word for it. Go to Yule's channel. Go to Pele. I think has a. There's lots of retailers. Larry, I think there's lots of retailers out there. Retailers who admit, by the way, that they don't like the direction of current comics. So these aren't. It's not like these are people who are quote unquote pushing stuff that you don't like. These are people who probably agree with you. And they are saying they will say the same things, like it's on them to order, and if they don't think something is going to sell, they short their order. And more retailers, by the way, are starting to get to the point of not wanting to put up with the fuss of ordering like 500 copies of something in order to qualify for the variant. They're getting tired of that game, and so they're not. And that's going to change variant schemes in the short term. It's going to make some of these variants probably more valuable. So you are going to see places order more for a period of time just so they can keep their whales happy. But that's what's going on. That's the big stacks. Not 100% of the time. It is definitely always true, and you see it in those sales numbers videos I do, where a retailer will order high on like the 4th or 5th issue, and then the bottom will drop out. I think that you could make that conclusion with Miss Marvel, where that storyline in Civil War II, but bluntly, we always point to Miss Marvel, but one consistent picture across the board is if you look at a ton of comics around Civil War II, the bottom dropped out of a lot of series at that point. You'll notice steep declines. It wasn't just that one Miss Marvel storyline, it was a lot of comics. Civil War II was not a great thing for a number of series. They all had pretty steep drops. And so I have seen some photos of some Civil War II crossovers where there's big stacks on the shelf. And it's like, what happened there? Well, the retailer assumed that, Civil War sold like crazy, and they assumed that Civil War II would do, as well. And it didn't. And they got stuck with a lot of comics. And that's a case of the quality of the storyline, meaning Civil War II, did not capture the buyer's imaginations. It was not well received, and so everything suffered. Civil War, the first one, the Mark Millar one, it sold out freaking everywhere. Like it not only did that comic sell, but everything attached to that comic sold. The crossovers all did great, and so it's not the craziest thing in the world for a retailer to go, oh, here's Civil War II. It's Bendis. Bendis is a bigger name. Cool. We got reasonable art team. Let's order high on it, and they do. And then 3 months later, the comic comes out, and the event is much colder than was expected, and the tie-ins don't sell. And then they're left with big stacks. And there you can point to that and go, see, this was a case of a storyline didn't land with the readers, shops over-ordered, and they're unsellable. But again, 9 times out of 10, when I see these photos and people send them to me, they're number one issues. And the answer there is it was connected to the variant cover, and the retailer went into that one knowing what they were getting. Overships really doesn't apply to any of this. I mean, overships happen, and you will see thicker stacks, but keep in mind, overships, and this is one of these big misnomers, and I know, again, one of the bigger YouTube channels made this claim as well, that like a shop ordered 5 copies of Captain Marvel, and Marvel sent them like 300 copies. And I will say there as well, prove it. Sorry, I'm sorry. You're gonna have to show the invoice. I don't buy that one. I do talk to people in David Gabriel's office. I'm on many retailer forums on Facebook. Overships, I've seen overships double. I've seen overships occasionally triple. But No, never. Like I ordered 5 copies and I got 100. Never. That is nobody has ever made that claim. If that's true and somebody has that proof, man, I will not only do a video apologizing, I will promote that information because that would be absolutely sinister if that was going on. But no, it isn't going on. So anyway, there you go. Why those big stacks? Like again, boring reason. There you have it. That's the boring reason for it. Um, I get it. I get why people would kind of like to really have that as a big gotcha, but it really isn't. It's next time you're in your retailer, if you see giant stacks of comics there, ask your retailer like, hey, why did you order so many copies? And then that retailer will like throw a drink at you and probably tell you to get out, and then you could write a bad review on Yelp, and things can happen. I don't know. Anyway, there you go. There's your answer. Hope that answered stuff. Argue with me in the comments below. Like and subscribe, and thanks for listening.